Hey friends, who would win in a fight? One of every Pokemon or a billion lions? There's a timely debate, but it seems like it isn't one of those big, controversial internet debates as much as it is something everyone already seems to agree on. But, not only do I think there is a way that the lions could take it, I don't think there's anything the Pokemon could do about it. Before I get to that, we need to establish how exactly this fight even happens, because there's a few different ways to interpret how Pokemon fight. You could scale the Pokemon on anime feats and game lore, read through the Pokedex for information, or look at how everything works in the game mechanics. All three of them directly contradict each other and change how the battle would play out. And I'll be using that last one because game mechanics are the easiest to quantify, and also because it's the one where the lions win, which is, the point of the video. Speaking of mechanics, Pokemon battles are usually pretty straightforward, but that's when it's 1 versus 1, not 1,000 versus a billion. There isn't exactly a precedent for a battle like that, especially not one where one of the teams isn't even Pokemon. So first we have to figure out what the rules of a battle on that scale would even be. Starting simple, with double battles, when there's 2 Pokemon on each side, everyone still gets to perform 1 action per turn with the order determined by the speed stat. But unlike in singles, where every move affects either the Pokemon that used it, the opponent, or both, now there's a bunch of different ways they could target. Sometimes they still only affect one Pokemon on either side, but sometimes they damage everyone except the user, or protect a whole side of the field. And importantly, some of them damage all opponents. Also, some abilities work differently, but none of them will matter. As the sequel to Double Battles, Pokemon Black and White gave us the not nearly as popular Triple Battle. Now there's 3 Pokemon on each side, and that's pretty much the whole gimmick. But alongside that, now we see that the chart from before is even bigger, with even more categories. The reason for that is, among other things, most of the moves that hit every opponent in double battles are now in this all adjacent foes category. Still doing an area of effect, but now we know that they don't really hit all opponents. They hit the one in front of the user, and the ones next to that one. That translates to hitting everyone if there's only 2 enemies, or if you're facing the middle of 3 of them. But if you're off to the side in a triple battle, for the most part you pretty much don't interact with any Pokemon 2 spots away. The only moves that do still hit all foes in triple battles are entry hazards, traps that only trigger when a Pokemon is switched out. But the challenge isn't a billion lions versus every Pokemon and some humans, so there won't be any trainers, which means no switching out, making entry hazards completely useless. Besides that, most of the moves that affect all Pokemon are also irrelevant, with just a few exceptions that I'll talk about later. After triple battles, Pokemon X and Y introduced the Horde Battle, where your one Pokemon can battle up to 5 wild Pokemon. Not much is new here, it does prove that having unequal teams is valid, so that's cool. But all the moves work the same way they did in triple battles, except that those all-adjacent foes attacks can hit all 5 enemies, not just 3 of them. Internally speaking, this is because it's still a triple battle, but with 2 enemies taking the spots of what would be 2 allies. So even though it doesn't look like it, the enemies are basically surrounding your Pokemon. They're all adjacent, but still only 3 of them are on the other side of the field. One more thing to note in Horde battles, some wild Pokemon will always attack each other, even when you present a clearly bigger threat to all of them. They hate each other so much that they'll take each other out, sometimes even breaking the range rules, before ever attacking you, their opponent. In-game, this only happens with either Zangoose and Seviper, and with Heatmor and Durant. I could argue there should be more rivals, like Yungoos and Alolan Rattata, or Groudon and Kyogre, but all that goes back to lore, and I did say I was only gonna use game mechanics, so I'll stick with just these 2 pairs. That summary took a lot longer than I thought I would. But now with the battle mechanics established, we still need to figure out some details on how both sides are set up. For the Every Pokemon team, as of the Indigo Disc DLC to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, there are 1,025 distinct Pokemon from Bulbasaur to Pecharunt. But that doesn't include things like regional forms or variants like the Wormadams, which are distinct Pokemon with different appearances and abilities, so I think they count. If I instead count every variant of every Pokemon, then there'd be billions of them, and most of them would be Spinda. It kinda ruins the spirit of the question if the Pokemon outnumber the lions, so if I instead only count mechanically distinct variants who have different types or movesets, now there's a lot less. I'll count transformations like the Rotom forms, but not ones that happen in the middle of battle, meaning Mega Evolutions count as unique since they change at the very beginning, and Pokemon like Deoxys get multiple since they only transform out of battle, but like only one cast form. Palafin is an exception because they need to switch out to change forms. Since there's no switching out, Palafin gets to show up twice, once in Zero form and once in Hero form. All of that considered, it brings the head count of the final Pokemon roster to 1,192. For Lions, the number of them is a lot easier, but to actually be in a Pokemon battle, they still need a type, some moves, and stats that work with the mechanics of the battle, and maybe an ability if it comes up. Starting with the type, saying normal is tempting. It's kinda like the default, and it is weak to all the things you'd expect a Lion to be weak to. But in Pokemon, all the types, including the normal type, are linked back to some kind of vague magic energy that the Lions just wouldn't have. But the game mechanics do fully support being typeless, it just doesn't normally happen outside special circumstances. So we're probably dealing with typeless Lions, who have no resistances or immunities. After that, moves like Scratch and Bite seem right for their attacks, and Bite, being Dark-type, would solve two major hurdles the Lions have, with Ghost-type Pokemon being immune to normal-type damage, and Shedinja's Wonder Guard making them immune to most types of damage. But like with their type, they'd probably get typeless Lion versions of Scratch and Bite instead, which still solves the Ghost problems, but not Wonder Guard. And then the stats are difficult. I've seen people just give the Lions Pyroar's stats, but that's dumb, so I won't. And instead I tried to do something a lot dumber. Because in addition to the triple battle, Generation 5 also introduced Pokéstar Studios, which is, as far as I can tell, the only place across all the mainline games that you can have Pokemon battles with enemies that aren't Pokemon. One of which is even a relatively regular human guy. That means, theoretically, I can use Bryson Man here as an average human for comparison to figure out what the average Lion stats would be. Or I could, if any of it was real. Because while I did spend a very long time precisely calculating how much stronger, faster, and tougher Lions are than humans, and accounting for all the possible exponential curves in Pokemon stats, Pokéstar Studios doesn't feature real battles, it's all a movie production. You don't really knock this actor unconscious, and these aren't really the stats of a human. Not unless humans have the same stats as this thing. And that kinda sucks, cause that was pretty much the only lead I had on accurately measuring how the stats work. So instead I have to go with the very scientific method of guessing. Looking back at that master list I made earlier, in my completely subjective opinion, it seems like Pokemon design stop being defined by a low stat when that stat hits around 50 points. So that's a good baseline for 5 of the 6 stats, since the Lions aren't notably bad in any of those categories. For special attack, though, I can't imagine they'll be shooting fireballs or lightning bolts, so that one might as well be as low as it can be. That gives the average Lion an estimated stat total of 251. Pretty far below the average for the Pokemon, which sits around 450. Now then, with all that established, we can finally set up the titular battle. There's 1,192 Pokemon on one side, standing in Pokédex order, and on the other side there should be 838,926 rows of 1,192 lines each, with a slightly smaller row at the very end, but the ones all the way back there won't end up mattering much. The front row of lines will be considered adjacent to the Pokemon, and the lines behind those will become exposed as the front rows faint. Before that, they can only be attacked by ranged moves in the any other Pokemon and all Pokemon categories, and likewise, the lines' turns are essentially skipped, unless they're either exposed or can attack at range. There are a bunch of other ways to line everything up that are equally faithful to the mechanics, like having the Pokemon in a random order, or lining both teams up in long, single, double, or triple file lines, but all of them end the same way. Because here's the thing, 1 billion lions is a lot of lions. Outside of a few exceptions, the difference in numbers alone is almost the only thing the Lions need to guarantee their victory. The way damage is calculated in Pokemon, an attack that hits cannot do 0 damage. Every Lion that attacks successfully will deal some damage, which means their stats barely matter. Every time the Lions get to take their turns, they'll attack every Pokemon for at least 1 HP, except in cases where evasion is raised or accuracy is lowered. But even those won't really end up mattering that much because of the sheer number of Lions. Over the course of the battle, every Pokemon would take minimum hundreds of thousands of points of chip damage before they'd get through all those rows of Lions. But even with maxed out stats at level 100, none of them get anywhere close to handling that kind of punishment. The highest HP is a tie between Eternatus in their Eternamax form, and Blissey. Both of them can reach a maximum of just 714 HP, which is usually a lot. Altogether, the entire team of max-statted, max-leveled Pokemon only clocks in at 412,108 total HP. Even if I let the Pokemon do full-power Dynamaxes, that only doubles each of their max health, bringing the total to 806,108 HP, still not even breaking a million, whereas the Lion side has at least a billion total health. Even if they sometimes evade, the Pokemon are only going to last maybe a few thousand turns. The Lions, on the other hand, have much better staying power. Assuming every single Pokemon could knock out 3 Lions every turn using an all-adjacent foes attack, the Pokemon would have to take on 838,926 Lions each, which would take 279,642 turns of battle. Even if millions of Lions die, all of the Pokemon would struggle themselves unconscious long before they take out even 1% of the army. I think Slacking, with their ability Truant, would last the longest, but even with some higher PP moves and a Lepa Berry, they still can't last even 250 turns before they faint from struggle. And back to the invincible Shedinja, they run out of PP by turn 150 at the latest, and struggle themselves out of battle 1 turn later. Even if they wanted to brute force through the fight, the Pokemon simply do not have enough PP. There are still a few special cases that would give the Lions some trouble, like those All Foes and All Pokemon categories of moves. I mentioned before that the All Foes category seems to only have entry hazards, which are relevant when there's no switching out, and in the All Pokemon category, most of them also don't matter for this, but one of them does stand out: Parish Song, a move that knocks out every Pokemon that hears it 3 turns later. While the description does say it only works on Pokemon, that's stupid, so I'll say it works on Lions for the sake of argument. If a Pokemon uses Parish Song after a few turns, every combatant that hears it will faint except for the handful of Pokemon with the ability Soundproof. But not all the Lions would hear the song. Even if the sound travels all the way to the back row, the challenge isn't about a billion average Lions or a billion identical Lions, it's just about a billion Lions. And if you have a billion Lions, I'd imagine some of them are gonna be deaf. It doesn't seem like there's any research on deafness in lions, for some reason, but for animals I could find data on, the rates of hearing loss either from age or birth defects do vary by animal, but always seem to be at least 1%, with the lowest rate I saw for total hearing loss being 0.1% of a population. Everything I saw about cats put those numbers a lot higher, but since it was all house cats and genetic defects tend to be exaggerated in pets, I'll stick with the lowest number I saw, being that 0.1%. Maybe even 0.01% to compensate for the low lifespan of deaf lions. Being deaf would probably mean those lions have lower evasion or something, but it would also mean that they're immune to moves that rely on hearing, like Parish Song. Going forward with that 0.01%, that means, after Parish Song goes through, there would be at most 17 Pokemon left standing, and at least 100,000 lions. And that's even still assuming that the number of deaf lions in the battle is proportional to the population, but since the Pokemon get perfect stats and ideal movesets, there's no reason all the lions that show up couldn't be deaf. Besides Parish Song, there are still a few moves that target all Pokemon and would matter. While most of the weathers, terrains, and rooms don't do anything that could really stop the lions, 2 of them do. Hail and Sandstorm both deal damage to every Pokemon every turn, with a few types being immune. Since the damage is based on the max health of each fighter, that means everyone not immune will be knocked out after 16 turns of either weather. Lions are not usually well adapted to either of those weathers, and so would normally take full damage. A few casts of Sandstorm could take out the entire army. But, in southern Africa, there are lions fully adapted to the Namibian desert, an environment that gets frequent sandstorms. And as such, I think it's fair to say that Namibian lions, while still not being rock, ground, or steel type, would probably be immune to the damage from Sandstorm by Pokemon logic. Meaning that, if we load the army with a billion of them, now all that Sandstorm would do is thin out most of the Pokemon. For the record, there aren't a billion Namibian lions. Estimates I saw put their numbers under 100 even. But considering there are less than 100,000 total lions alive on Earth, either way we're already ignoring population sizes. Speaking of lions being alive, if leaning on congenital hearing loss and obscure micropopulations weren't enough of a stretch, hail is the last thing I could find that might be a problem for the lions, because they aren't very well known for living anywhere cold enough for regular hail, or at least not today. But 700,000 years ago, there was a species of cat called Panthera fossilis, which around 500,000 years ago split into 2 different lines. One of them is the still living Panthera leo, or modern lion, and the other is the recently extinct Pantherasphalia, or the cave lion. While they're gone now, in the 500,000 years they were around, the Ice Age happened, and in the Ice Age, Pantherasphalia not only thrived in areas like Mammoth Steppe, that had all the dry, windy conditions needed for violent sandstorms, but also in the much wetter, more hail-filled Beringia. So cave lions should be just fine in both damaging weathers. If you think it's unfair to use an extinct lion, it's important to note that the Pokémon team also has some extinct species, alongside ones from the future, ones from parallel universes, aliens, gods, the undead, and things that just straight up do not exist. So I think the cave lion is completely fair game. That is pretty much it though. As far as I can tell, the Pokémon just have nothing else they can throw at an army of deaf cave lions. They'll certainly defeat thousands of them before the battle is over, and they'll take no damage for the first turn if Greninja uses Mat Block, but that'll only work once, and after that, without any other trump cards, some Pokemon will take each other out, some will faint to hundreds of low damage swipes, and the rest will struggle themselves unconscious before the vast majority of lions ever even attack. This still only works if you interpret the question via game mechanics. If you go by the Pokédex, the lions can't even approach some Pokemon. And if you go by lore, then the Pokemon have literal omnipotence on their side, and I'm not sure if I can figure out a way for a bunch of cats to overcome that. Still though, there is a way that 1 billion lions win against every Pokemon, just as long as the lions all come from an extinct branch and are hearing impaired. Stay nice, everyone.